Good afternoon, Tanya Aguilar. Welcome to APTN InFocus. I'm Daryl Stranger. There have been many incidents recently ranging from fires to states of emergencies within Indigenous communities. And so our show today is focusing on emergency situations, the response times, and the resources available to communities in these situations. Now, as always, we want you to join in on our conversation. You can tweet us at APTN InFocus, or you can send us an email at infocus@aptn.ca. Now, before I introduce you to our guests today, let's look at one story involving a First Nation in Saskatchewan. A large fire recently on the Mosquito Grizzly Bearhead Leanman First Nation in Saskatchewan has displaced 8 families. The blaze is drawing the attention to a desperate need for fire trucks on First Nations. A 30-unit building burned down in late April with no casualties, thankfully. Chief Tanya Aguilar says the community will rebuild and make sure the families have temporary homes soon. She says they've called in the Red Cross. The First Nation does not have a fire hall or fire truck or proper training for volunteer firefighters. There's also no agreement with the nearby municipality of Battleford, but the city's fire department came to fight the flames along with Red Pheasant First Nation and the community of Cochin. Aguilar says they have been trying to get help for years. This incident is one of nearly a dozen fires in remote communities in the past 2 years. And joining us now with more on this is Chief Tanya Aguilar. Chief Aguilar, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your day today. I know it's not the greatest subject we're talking about, but we do appreciate your time. Can you tell us about the recent fire in the community, and what impact has that had?
Well, we recently had 8plex that burned completely to the ground. We have 8 families currently displaced. We do have an emergency plan. We have Red Cross that are providing temporary support. The nation has also contributed, some temporary housing. And as for leadership, it is our goal to have all 8 families in a temporary home within the next 8 days.
Okay, that's good to know. And how are the families that have been left homeless or displaced by the fire doing? How are they doing?
Well, a lot of mixed emotions, a roller coaster of, emotions going amongst each family. They call, mornings are tough is what they're expressing. Realization that everything is gone. Dreams, little children that, know that Cookham's house burned down, so there's a lot of those questions that are, happening within the homes, and just a lot of emotion, a lot of shock. Mm-hmm. And, they're very resilient, they're very optimistic, and really want to stay focused. And they're all very grateful that no one passed.
Yeah, that's a great point you made out there, that thankfully nobody has passed. Is there any idea as to what started the blaze at all? Has that been determined?
No, there's a number of, rumors, from a garbage fire to a stove left on to a stove not working properly to flickering lights, and as far as us leaders, we're very happy that nobody got hurt. We've encouraged, our families to stay focused, not to point fingers or blame, just concentrate on the next few days. Mm-hmm. As to, ensuring their needs are met, immediate needs are met.
Well, Chief Aguilar, Antiman, our show today is focused on emergency services on First Nations, and I wanted to ask, does your nation have the support that it needs from the various levels of government in a situation like this?
You know, I've been elected now almost 4 years, and that was our, the immediate platform, to have a fire hall, to have a fire truck, to have proper training. And it's 4 years. We have our own source revenue to match, Indigenous services contribution, cost sharing for a fire hall. We have a project team, and it's a very slow process. We've had 4 fires, that took place in 2022, and it's 2023. We had this one fire, but it impacted 8 families. And so that's something that immediately, the day of the fire, 7 p.m., we had a meeting with Indigenous Services Canada. We had a meeting with the Federation of Sovereign Nations and Battleford's agency tribal chiefs to push this very topic. Like we didn't even have proper PPE. We had, our volunteer firefighters with running shoes, some using blankets in this day and age. So we're really frustrated, and this is our top priority, has been, and it just demonstrates how slow the process is. Mm-hmm. So we made it very clear, like, what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? Are we waiting for death? Like, we're not the only nation in this situation. Yeah, we have many First Nations that do not have the proper training, proper equipment, proper facilities, and this is a priority. You can also see how important that facility is if you want to have an old folks home, if you want to have economic development, if you want to have, bigger developments. So this is the core. We do need, this service. So that meeting that took place, I'm confident with all the parties around the table that it'll move quickly.
Well, just so our audience knows, Chief, where is the nearest fire hall, and what's the current response time like?
Well, the nearest fire hall is a municipal, the town of Battleford, which is 30 miles north of us, so about 25-minute drive. Okay. And I guess, I just want to emphasize, we don't even have an agreement with the municipal in big cases like this. They did not have to come out. And, because of our relationship with the town council and building that relationship over these last few years, they stepped up, they came out. Unfortunately, the eightplex was fully engulfed in flames. It was not, we could not save it. Our priority was to keep everybody safe. And, they were there to support, putting out the blaze. And, I do want to emphasize, though, our nation has taken, many steps. We even, with our volunteer firefighters, we had caddies, which is, I don't know exactly the volume of water in almost like a big tank. And we had those out. So we had 2 of the caddies out. We had 2 of the neighboring nation, Red Pheasant First Nation, they came out. And then we had Cochin, which is like an hour away from us. They came out because from the eightplex, the blaze went into a grass fire, taking off to the west side of the nation. So we're really grateful that we were able to put out the blaze with those caddies. And we were grateful for Battleford's fire department to come and, help us and support us in the time of crisis.
Well, you mentioned the many steps the community has taken for something like this. What has been put in place for fire prevention right now with the resources that you do have?
Well, we have volunteer firefighters with very limited training, no PPE. We right on the spot, the day of, we had our tribal council, coming with PPE because they recognize they're not properly, dressed for the fire. So that is something that we discussed in the meeting. Like, this is a priority. This is something that needs to be done. Like, what are we waiting for? It's frustrating. And, I've had the opportunity to work with two elected council teams. And both teams have been active. And, so like I said, I'm really confident that something is going to happen. This is 8 families. 8 families have no homes. Yeah. And so this fire hall, the fire truck, the training is all needed. That capacity is needed in our communities.
Well, speaking of the multiplex, the loss of an entire multiplex is certainly going to affect your housing stock. How is the community going to rebound from that and try work around the issue of losing a multiplex in such an important building?
Well, we've been working on a housing strategy. We have our own housing strategy of the shortage of housing that is currently taking place. So we were working on 15 large families, having homes for them. So I made it very clear, our leadership team, to separate the housing need and the immediate need. So we'll have a specific team to address the 8 units. As a nation, we've decided we will not go with a multiplex, that each family will have an individual unit. We have our engineers right now, creating a plan for the water, the tie-in ready, the groundwork. And we're anticipating our goal to start building mid-June. And we're really pushing it. But, our goal is to have these 8 families be back in their home, by September, end of September.
Okay. Well, let's certainly hope that can happen indeed. And I wanted to ask, we're just talking about fire right now, but what other issues does your nation face when it comes to, there's fire, there's EMS, and also policing? And what are some of the other issues that the community might be facing when it comes to maybe an emergency situation?
There's a lot of social issues, and with this fire in itself, we just recently come out of a COVID pandemic. We know the stresses that took place. We know the increases of family violence and, addictions and all the, gambling issues. We're familiar with, all of that. All our nations are. And so, with the loss of this multiplex, it's a huge loss. There's grief. It's the mental health. So we are, active in ensuring that we have those resources. We're advocating for those additional resources because we know they're going to be impacted. The families, the children, the school, even teachers and school bus drivers. Everybody's impacted. Everybody knew somebody that lived in the eightplex, and driving in that area. And we knew how busy it was in that area with the children and the families, the single families that lived in those units.
Well, Chief Aguilar, Antiman, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you have tomorrow? What would that magic yield you?
Oh, wow. That's a really loaded question. To ensure that every person in the nation had shelter, because it's important. If you don't have a home, if you don't have a shelter, how can you think about the future? If you're couch surfing, if you're bouncing, no stability, no home stability environment, how can you think of the future? Yeah. It's very difficult. How can you think of goals? How can you think of your education, your health, your well-being? So it's really, really critical that home environment is a must for all members of all nations. It's a must. You need to have some stability. You need to have some structure to feel safe, to think and plan to build for a better future. And with that, we'll have stronger generations, a brighter future, healthier nations, so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So if I was to have a wand, it would be definitely having a roof over your head, having a place to sleep, feeling safe, and, having the ability to think future. What do I want to become when I'm this age, or what do I want to achieve in 3 months or 6 months or 5 years, So having a home is really important, whether you're living in the, on reserve, the rural setting, or whether you're living in a municipal or in a city. That stability is a must.
Chief Aguilar, Anti-Man, that's really well said, and we'll have to leave it there, but we certainly do appreciate you coming on. I know it's not, the community is going through a tough time right now, so we do appreciate you coming on, and we certainly wish the best to you and the community moving forward. So thank you so much, Miigwech.
Thank you.
All right, we have to step aside for a moment. We'll have more Fire Talk when we come back.
Join our conversation now. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus. And send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
Welcome back to APTN in Focus. Our next guest joining us is from the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council. Now, the council was established last year in place of the Aboriginal Firefighters Association of Canada. I spoke with Arnold Lazare earlier for more on fire safety within Indigenous communities. Arnold, thank you so much for being here today on APTN in Focus. First off, can you just describe for us what does fire safety look like currently within Indigenous communities? What is everybody seeing within Indigenous communities?
Well, it's a combination of have and have-nots for sure. I'm in Kahnawake, and we are definitely a have community. 42 members, fire service, state-of-the-art equipment, 22 departments in the mutual aid system. And then you have the more remote communities that don't have operating equipment. They don't have fire prevention programs. The housing is substandard. So this creates a perfect storm where you have a lack of appropriate or housing to code. You have a housing shortage, so there's multiple people living in the homes. So when there is an incident, and if they don't have a proper emergency evacuation plan, then you see that the statistics that we're seeing are much higher than mainstream deaths.
Well, you mentioned statistics. Arnold, do you have any statistics that can sort of paint an overall picture of the situation within Indigenous communities?
Well, we have done a study on morbidity and mortality, and unfortunately, people in First Nations are 10.2 more times likely to die from fire. Once again, it's based on that systemic problem. In the last month since January, we've documented at least 8 deaths in First Nations, and we're continuing to collect the data so that we can then use that data to put it into fire prevention activities.
So then, given what you just said, Arnold, what are some of the main concerns from the council when it comes to fire safety?
Well, we do know that fire smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors are what going to save lives. So in our 3 programs, we have a fire department assessment tool, we have a community safety assessment tool, and we have a home occupant safety assessment tool, where we will meet with the 3 levels and give them an assessment of where they are, but more importantly, what they need to do to make sure that their homes and their communities are safer.
So then what are some of the things communities need to do to go about fixing some of these issues?
The first item is to ensure that every house has a working smoke detector. That is the first and foremost fire safety issue that will allow people to get out safely. We know that the building materials today are much more volatile. You have the pressed wood beams that are basically wood chips and glue. When you add a little bit of heat, they fail. So that's a big concern. So we do know that if people have working smoke detectors, that will make their ability to escape so much more. And that's where we're putting our focus on, is having good exit drills in the home, making sure that people know what to do, especially with the youth. Don't hide in a closet, having a common meeting place so the family knows that everybody's out. And then we're also focusing on the response, which is the fire trucks and items like that.
How do we go about, or how do communities go about getting some of the things that the haves have in terms of, whether it be fire trucks or proper training even for some of the volunteer firefighters that are within communities? What's sort of the process, and how can we get some of these communities to have some of those things?
It comes down to education, and education of chief and council, because once again, it's going to take resources. And we found through our engagement that a lot of times the resources don't necessarily match the needs. So our office will work with the communities to do an assessment. And once again, with the focus on fire prevention, fire safety. And then from there, we will build on making a solid safety program, which would mean getting into the schools, getting into the daycares. And once we get that level, then we can start addressing the response system. So let's presume that a fire truck costs $100,000, and that's a very basic fire truck. If we took $1,000 and engaged somebody, be it a fire chief or a fire champion, to go into the schools to make sure that every child knows to get out and stay out, then we will definitely see the amount of death drop significantly.
Well, when it comes to some of the resources that you mentioned, how important is it, especially for these northern and remote communities that are, kilometers and kilometers away from the nearest maybe fire hall in the next town?
It comes down to a clear understanding of what is the capability and what is the need. For instance, if there's a community with 50 houses, the ability to staff a full-time fire department is very, very challenging. So
right.
What we would have to do is say, what type of equipment would be necessary to provide a level of service? And that's where the chief and council are very important, because in many jurisdictions, we're looking at a three-tiered response. An external fire service, an internal where they would go in and do rescue, and then a full fire service with, say, extrication and high-angle rescue. So in many small communities, if we can train them to an external service where if they have a good fire prevention program and the people can get out, then we can look at looking at saving buildings, stopping the house from spreading. Once again, we're focused on saving lives.
Right, okay, that's a great point you're making there. And I wanted to ask Arnold about the role governments play, and what role do the federal, provincial, and even the local or municipal governments play when it comes to aiding or helping keep these Indigenous communities safe?
Part of our process is that the governance understands and makes a priority for the safety in the community. It has to be a top, there has to be support from the top, because that's where the resources are allocated. Government has a place to play as many of the primary funding agencies for communities, But once again, in our engagement, we found that some resources are designated for fire are being given to other items, and we have to eliminate that disconnect.
So Arnold, given everything that we've talked about so far, what are some of the things that the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council is looking at working towards here in the next few weeks, months, maybe some short and long-term goals?
Well, the short-term goals is we want to, we have a program called the National Incident Reporting System, which is our database so that we can collect to see where people are, where the fires are. And from that, we can tailor make our prevention. We will go into the community at their request and do a fire department assessment, a home safety assessment. And in those things, there's very easy recommendations that can be done. We will work with the communities that have fire services to improve it. And we've been requested to assist in some communities that don't have a fire service or had a fire service and it failed a few years ago to revitalize it. We're working with the jurisdictions of fire marshals and fire commissioners, Ontario, Quebec, BC, Saskatchewan, to say once we get an idea of the big picture, what resources can we directly give to eliminate the immediate problems. The Indigenous Services is working with the AFN to come up with a strategy on fire safety. There's a conference in May in Ottawa, and we are participating to have people learn from what we're doing. We have a public safety education conference in September in Montreal, where we have 4 streams of training, looking at fire operations, fire governance, emergency management, and climate change, because that's something that we see. Climate change is affecting the operations, so we're trying to be proactive and addressing the issues before it becomes reality.
For somebody who's watching this and they live on an Indigenous community or in an Indigenous community, what's something that they can do? You've been saying all during our conversation, make sure the smoke detectors are in good working order. What's something that they can do to best sort of protect themselves and give themselves the most safety awareness? I
have 3 boys with 8, soon to be 10 grandchildren. I make sure that the smoke detectors are tested monthly. We make sure that the kids know where to have a rally point if there is the smoke detector goes off, and we constantly remind them what they should do when they hear the smoke detectors. So the thing is, if people can get out of the house, we're able to build another house.
Right.
It would be challenges, but we just want to stop the deaths. And smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors are the 2 main items that will stop people from dying.
That's certainly good advice there, Arnold. We'll have to leave it there, but I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on and providing some insight into what's going on, especially when it comes to fire safety within Indigenous communities.
Thank you. You can expect to hear quite a bit more in the very near future about different programs that we're going to be offering.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Arnold.
Thank you. Yawa.
All right, let's go to social media now with our social media editor, Jesse Andrushko, to hear what some of you are saying about today's topic.
Thanks, Daryl. Online, we asked, how can emergency services in First Nation communities be improved? We got a lot of insightful responses. Let's take a look. First, from Terry, education and training programs within the First Nation communities and government support would go a long way. The forgotten peoples no more. Grant said, we need paramedics in every First Nation community. Responding ambulances usually take an hour or more to show up when emergencies happen in the Interlake Reserves in Manitoba. From Stacy, More preventative actions and resources should be in place if one really wants to make a change. Throwing more efforts into things that are done after the damage has been done is already too late. Rain said, better communication systems and alerts, more disaster and emergency preparedness training. Lastly, from Enrique, actual First Nation responders needed. Thank you all for taking the time to share. If you want to add your opinion, here's how. Join our conversation now. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus. And send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
All right, thanks so much for that, Jesse, and for you as well at home. We have to pause the program one final time here. We still have a couple of interviews left, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to APTN in Focus. Our next guest joining us is James Favel. He's been working towards helping Indigenous people in a number of ways over the years, including through the Bear Clan. And his latest venture has him and others going into Indigenous communities, providing support any way they can. James, thank you so much for joining us here on APTN in Focus. Now, you've been working to help people in some capacity for a number of years. Can you tell us about your current work?
So the new company is called Anishinaabe Ambassadors Incorporated. We started under pandemic, so we did the first couple of years were about pandemic supports. Then thankfully the pandemic's on the wane, so we've shifted gears, and we've been doing some mental health supports, self-harm, that kind of stuff. And most recently what we've been doing is supporting community BCRs against drugs, alcohol, and the violence that's precipitated by the presence of those things in the community.
So I wanted to go back to you starting the organization. So what led you to start that organization in the first place?
I guess it was just the demand. I got in touch with a friend of mine that's with Indigenous Services Canada, and they were looking for some supports for the communities that were hit hard by COVID. And so I basically, this is a program that I had started under Bear Clan, the ambassadors, and I just brought it with me and just changed it up a little bit to make it fit. Yeah.
And you mentioned some of the things that you do within these communities, but what are some of the things you're seeing when you're in these communities? What are some of the main issues that they're telling you about or you're seeing?
Well, and again, it's deprivation. There's so little for people to do, and they're struggling to cope with that. And so there's a lot of escaping, right? So they're using drugs and alcohol to escape, what they're dealing with on the day to day. So we go in there and we try to help smooth things out a little bit and keep people focused or get them refocused.
And how do you do that, James? How do you get people focused and back sort of on the right track? What are some of the things you guys do?
One of the things that we do with this organization is not just about going into a community with a group of people and doing a job, for 30 to 60, 90 days and then leaving. We engage with the community. We try to get community members, like when we go into a community, we get them to hire a bunch of community members to follow us and do the work that we're doing, so that when we leave, the work continues. And so that's one of the things that we do. And then, again, it's always been about engagement with me. It's always been about building capacity. It's always been about, lifting people up and giving them some hope. And so I just carry that ideology with me wherever I go.
So it's for our audience who might not know, can you just sort of maybe walk us through, how you go about going into a community? Does the community reach out to you? Is it sort of a mutual thing? And just sort of explain the process of how you guys go into a community.
Sure. So typically the community reaches out to me and asks, for us to come out, and basically what happens is the wife and I will go out and we'll do a scan of the community. So we go out for a couple of days, we see what's going on in the community, see what amenities are available for our teams, get an idea for how things are in the community. If there's people like walking around the community, intoxicated and things like that. So we go in and look for all these kinds of triggers, right? And once we identify what's going on in the community, in cooperation and concert with the chief and council, we build a plan basically, and then we execute that plan. We get my team to come up a couple days later, typically, and we go in again, anywhere from 10 to 40 people will go in for, 30 to, we've been in Little Grand Rapids now going on 120 days. And we engage with the community. We try to be present. We try to be visible. What I've always seen is that it's strange, when you have like a close-knit community, like the ones in the north that we deal with, everybody knows everybody. There are a lot of them are family and things like that. So there's a reluctance to enforce the BCRs and things like that because it's uncomfortable, and I understand that. So we are different. We're outside of the community, but we are all like we're almost 100% Indigenous that work on my teams. We're almost all from reserves ourselves, so we have that lived experience, that shared experience, and we go in there and we try to lighten their load. We try to work with them. We don't put ourselves above anybody. We are there. We're the same, and I think it works very well. We engage with the children. We engage with the adults. We bring those people in to work with us so that they get an idea of what we're doing, and they build their own capacity in that respect, and it's empowering, and then there's a financial benefit to it as well. And yeah, it really, it's very holistic. And then the other thing is we don't ever try to criminalize anybody. What we're doing, with assisting the community with the BCRs against drugs and alcohol, RCMP are the last resort. We are almost never we almost never call the RCMP unless we absolutely have to, and we've been very fortunate. There's been no violence directed towards us. It's very smooth sailing for us for the most part. Again, when we come into the community, because we're fresh faces, people tend to want to listen to us a little bit. And it's always baffled me, that part. But
well, you mentioned one of the points that I wanted to bring up, one of the questions, and that people sort of relate to you guys better, and that's so. Do you find that they relate to you better because, like you said, you're not really in a position of authority like police or like like that? Do they relate to you better, just like you mentioned, because you are one of them, right?
I believe so. Again, like we're not the people that I hire. Again, I have the same ethic when it comes to sourcing my people as I did when I was with Bear Clan. So I use the people around me, like my community members, people that I've known for years, people that are marginalized, have been criminalized, people that need a second chance. And so we go in and I give them that opportunity to do better. And so the work benefits not just the communities that we serve, but it also benefits the people that are working with us, because I give those people a second chance to come out and do good work and give back to the community and rebuild themselves, and I think everybody senses that when we're together in the community. It's nobody, again, there's nobody coming in there saying, oh, I know better than you, so you should listen to me. It's like, we have a similar experience. This is how we work through it.
Right. And
it works better.
Well, and one of the things also is I was hoping you could sort of explain for maybe our audience down south or maybe in more urban communities, just what it's like to go up north to a remote community or, sort of one of those communities that may be a little more isolated than some of the bigger cities. And you had mentioned, everybody knows everybody, but can you just sort of explain what these communities are like and sort of the challenges that they face being so remote?
Well, I posted a picture on my Facebook yesterday, James Fable on Facebook, and we were up in Wasagamak we did 2 terms up there over the winter, and they have the northern store is on an island there, and in the summertime you use a boat, in the wintertime you go skidoo or quad or whatever, but in the fall and the spring the water's freezing up, you can't use a boat. So the store's not really accessible. They use helicopter to get to these places. It's $400, $300 to get a 2-minute journey by helicopter over to the store. It's ridiculous, and it's like that in Little Grand Rapids as well. The main northern store is on an island. It's very hard for people, to get to these places. The picture I posted on my Facebook yesterday was of a person who had fallen through the ice and was with their groceries beside them. They'd fallen through the ice and they were trying to get back on to the ice. And this is a reality that these people are living with. When we were up, the wife and I were up in Little Grand Rapids for 5 days a couple weeks ago, and it takes about 5 minutes to go from one side of town to the other side of town. There's not a lot in the middle, and it's not for lack of trying by the community, by leadership. It's just there's so little available to us. The resources that are given to us are not adequate. And so there's nothing for people to do. And like myself being up there for 5 days, I started losing it after 5 days. Mm-hmm. There's so, I didn't leave the hotel for a whole day and a half because there was just nowhere to go, nothing to do. My teams were working. I tagged along with them for a little bit, went to the helipad and watched some searches and things like that unfold. But realistically, in those small communities, there's no industry, there's almost no jobs. And then food is hard to get. The food quality at the northern store is rough, man. I was up there, like I said, 5 days. When I came home, my stomach was in knots. I couldn't, it's boxed food, it's frozen food. like there needs to be something more. So one of the things that we're trying to do is we want to start trying to get help with like gardening courses, how to cook food better, sourcing better foods. There's just got to be a better way, and so this is one of the things. We go into these communities and we share their experience with them, and it's a lot, you know, to manage, and it's painful to watch. It really is.
Well, and James, before we let you go here, our show today is sort of focused on emergency situations within Indigenous communities and some of the response times and that sort of thing. But why are organizations like yours and volunteers so important in these communities where some of that is lacking and where sometimes all they have are volunteers and organizations like yourself?
Well, you know, we're first and foremost, we are not volunteers. We are, we're paid for-profit company here. But it's important to have those supports. When we went into Little Grand Rapids, they had one community FNSO, that's First Nation Safety Officer, and he was trying to do it all by himself, and it's very hard, you know. I said, "When do you sleep?" He goes, "Oh, I don't really sleep. You know, I'm on call 24 hours a day." So what we do is we go in and we try to, again, shoulder the burden. We try to help build the capacity of the program. So we're supporting the building of the FNSO program. When we came there, there was one guy. Now there's 15. You know what I mean? Little with Sagamak, same thing. We came there, there was 6. When we left, there was probably 15. You know, we try to build these things up, and again, people need to know that they're supported in the work that they're doing, to feel empowered to do the work, and largely that's been missing in the communities that we've gone to. That supportive feeling for like the FNSOs. If there's only 4 FNSOs in a community of 1,500, they're going to be overwhelmed. You know what I mean? So we go in and we try to bolster their support, bolster their program, and it makes for more comfortable living for everyone. Mm-hmm. And it gives like the community members somebody who they can speak to and reach out to and you know, give their complaints to and air their grievances and things like that. And that's what we're there for. We're there to provide supports, and we do that under the leadership. We do that, like, we don't make any decisions on our own. We do everything after consultation with chief and council, and it works. It really produces a solid outcome. We've saved lives.
Well, James, there's certainly plenty to think about, and the work that you and others do is certainly just it's wonderful work, and I'm sure the communities and everybody appreciates that. So I want to say thank you, Miigwech, to you for coming on and sharing a bit of what you do, and you know why stuff like this is needed. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Our final guest on today's show is Prince Albert Grand Council Vice Chief Joseph Dasani. The Grand Council is looking at how they can better the policing situation within their communities, and they recently visited the Navajo Nation tribal police. Vice Chief Dasani, thank you so much for joining us here on APTN InFocus. The Prince Albert Grand Council recently visited the Navajo tribal police. Can you sort of explain for us what the trip was about?
On April 25th, we visited Chinle, Arizona, to visit their police department. We brought some delegation from the Grand Council, our leadership, our senators, some community members to look at what they all had there. Since back in 2019, we got the mandate at the Prince Albert Grand Council, exploring what would it look like in terms of self-administered policing for 28 of our communities within the Grand Council, the northern part of Saskatchewan. So, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, we're developing something that'll meet the needs of our communities, and to start thinking outside the box. What would that look like? What are some models that are out there? What are some of the takeaways, and learning from some of the best practices that are out there? As you know, the Dene community, you know, in northern Saskatchewan, we have Dene communities in northern Saskatchewan, and the Navajo is part of the Dene community as well. They speak the Dene language, similarities in terms of the linguistics part of that. So, and not only that, the Navajo, since 1886, since the signing of treaty, they've always had their policing, self-administered policing in their territories, over their lands and territories, and into their communities. So it was a good opportunity to, you know, to go down there and see firsthand what they're all engaged in. So we checked out their police department where they have their head office, and right next door to it, they had their training facility where they do training for programs and services. And right next to it, they called it their detention center. That would be like their correctional jail system right on their property there. Then right next to it, they had their court system. So they had their judges where they conduct their court system, right from the correctional facility. There's a walkway right to the court systems where they deal with offenses, and their court system they're all related. So not only that, we're looking at self-administered policing for the Grand Council, and we can't really. It's a great opportunity for us to start looking at the training aspects of how do we want our police officers to be trained. And another takeaway is the language barrier. The language, the Navajo Nation said that they can talk their language. If there's incidents in the community, they can talk their languages, and it helps a lot in terms of de-escalating some of the challenges that they have in the community. So it's a great opportunity, and learning about their history, learning about their culture, and how they've been operating for many years. And we're late in trying to get our police force going, but it was a good relationship building back in 2019 when we had our policing conference to develop the roadmap in terms of where we want to take this. The Navajos were part of that roadmap development in terms of the steps that we need to take in terms of getting our self-administered police rolling.
Well, so on that note, then, what is the current policing situation, on First Nations in Saskatchewan?
So right now it's by the RCMP, and a lot of our northern communities, it's run by the RCMP. And some communities have community security guards, sometimes they call it safety officers, etc. But those are a lot self-funded by the communities themselves. But the RCMP has been there. Some communities still don't have detachments there. So we're in the process of developing that feasibility study. What would that look like if we were to take over some of the police forces in the northern communities?
So then what more is needed in communities sort of in your region when it comes to policing?
Building that capacity. We have a lot of young people looking for opportunities, after graduating high school. What a good opportunity to get our young people engaged in policing. It could be the justice system, like judges, lawyers, whatever that may be. But a good opportunity is to look at the training component of the police force. So, we looked at the models that they have there, and how they're probably the only nation that is out there that trained their own. They get to utilize the federal and provincial training departments. They have the K-9 unit. They have the SWAT team, special forces, under the umbrella of Navajo Public Safety. So the EMT, emergency management, it's all under that umbrella. So there was a lot of takeaways in terms of how far we need to go. We know that we're just right at the start. We'll look at the policing model, we'll look at the training aspect of that, and how we can modernize the policing program that is out there to meet the needs of our communities.
So then, given everything that we've talked about right here, what are some of the future plans for your territory and emergency services for these communities?
So the future plans right now is getting into the communities, because we can't assume that we know what communities want. We need to have those grassroots community input right from the community. So the next 2 years, we're going to be engaging community members, talking about their community safety, what they would like to see done in their policing at the community level, and also talk to the leadership and find out, what do you want to see? We all know the challenges in our communities, but we want to see what more can be done. And within the next 2 years, we'll develop a report that will go back to our communities, to the community members and the the leadership that we have there to see if that's something that they want to engage in, is to have their self-administered policing right at the community level.
Well, certainly plenty to be looking ahead to and looking forward to here, Vice Chief. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for taking a few minutes of your day to sort of explain what's going on within your region, especially when it comes to policing. So thank you so much, Miigwech.
It's an exciting time. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Masicho.
All right, that is all we have for you this afternoon on APTN in Focus. Today's episode will be available as a podcast. You can listen and subscribe on aptnnews.ca/podcasts, or you can find us on your favorite player. And if you missed any of our past episodes and you want to catch up, you can find them and more on aptnnews.ca/infocus. For everyone here, I want to say thank you for joining us. Miigwech, Kinanaskmitten, have a great rest of your day.